Okay, g'day folks and welcome back. So the reason we're here today I have done day one of the new CN course. Now there have been some slight changes to the CN course. So those that aren't aware, the CN course is to drive a non-slew mobile crane greater than 3 tonne. Now the new changes to the CN course revolve around driving the crane on the road. Now the reason I thought I'd do the video on it is there's a lot of things that, especially those that have been driving them for a while, we take these things for granted and we don't realise that people new to the industry don't necessarily always think about these things. So I figured I'd do this video, and even those that have been driving them for a while, sometimes you've never actually been told these things and it may make your life easier as well. Now, I'll say the number one issue with driving a Franna on the road is make sure you only ever steer a Franna with one hand. Now it seems strange because you're always told keep 2 hands on the wheel, 10 and 2 and whatever it is, but that's for a vehicle where the front wheels turn. Now with the Franna, because the front wheels aren't actually turning and it is articulated in the middle, what you'll find is if you're trying to steer it with 2 hands, you're constantly fighting with it, all right? So you're always pulling one side to the other and you're always overcorrecting and you're making things worse as you drive along. So that's the number one thing you need to consider. Whenever you're driving it on the public roads, when you're driving at speed, always make sure only one hand is on the steering wheel. Now another issue driving these cranes on the road is they can react completely different to any other heavy vehicle. Now, for instance, a good one is when they start fishtailing or start getting a bit of speed wobbles up. If you've been used to driving heavy vehicles with a trailer, you're always taught that when the trailer starts fishtailing, what you do is you slightly accelerate and just pull that trailer straight out of those speed wobbles. Now, if you do that in a Franna, now look, keep in mind when I say Franna, I mean non-slew mobile crane. I just keep referring to Franna, easier to say, and typically that's what most people in industry would use. So with the Franna, what you're going to do is if you start getting the speed wobbles up, if you try and pull out of it, you're going to just worsen the problem because it's the speed that's actually causing it. So what you need to do is to wash that speed off, but do it nice and gently. Don't go slamming your foot on the brake. All right. So number one thing, take your foot off the accelerator. Make sure your engine brake's on. That'll start pulling you up. You can very lightly or gently apply the brake. As again, don't slam the brakes on. Just gently wash that speed off. Because what you don't want to do is hit the brakes and lock it up and end up in a very nasty and ugly position. So they're the two big differences in driving it. Well, for those that have been used to driving heavy vehicles. One is only ever steer with the one hand. Number two is if you do get those speed wobbles up, make sure you just wash that speed off nice and gently. Now, that's the difference to general heavy vehicles. Now, if you're not used to driving heavy vehicles in general, you've got to remember it's not going to stop on a dime. So when you're traveling, especially at speed, make sure you leave plenty of gap between you and the car in front to allow for that extra braking distance. All right, coming up to a corner, you can't just hang into the corner. Just take it nice and steady around those corners as well. Now that's for driving it on the road. But before you drive it on the road, you need to make some preparation for it as well. There's a few checks that you've got to do on the crane before you travel it on the road. Look, number one is going to make sure that the thing's registered. All right, that'd probably be a good start because you don't want to get pulled over in a Franna. And I know I have got a speeding ticket in a Franna previously. All right, so make sure it's registered. Make sure you configure the crane properly to travel on the road as well. So when I say configure the crane, make sure you take the hook off. All right, you don't go driving down the road with the hook on it. So make sure you take that hook off. Now, if you happen to be in Queensland, it's the only state I can think of actually. I know it's not in WA or Victoria, But if you are in Queensland, when you take the hook off, make sure you put that red flag on as well, because you need to make sure that red flag's on there if you're driving it in Queensland. Keep the boom nice and level, around about that 0 degrees. Just keep it nice and flat. It makes it easier to judge things, and the last thing you want to do is have the boom up in the air, come into a low bridge or come into some low structures, or if you're in Victoria, run into tram lines. All right, so keep it nice and level because you don't want to be running into anything while you're driving down the road. Now, before you even travel on the road, there's some checks you want to make on it. The number one thing you want to check always before you travel on the road is make sure the emergency steering pump is working. Now, the reason for this is if, for example, you're driving your car down the road and you lose power, so the engine cuts out, you'll still have steering. It will be a lot heavier, but you will still have steering. Now, with a Franna, because it doesn't turn the front wheels, it actually articulates in the middle on hydraulic rams. If the engine cuts out, you've got nothing to operate those hydraulics, which means no steering left. What the emergency steering pump is, it's a battery override. Right, so you need to make sure that's working, because the last thing you want to do is be driving down the road and all of a sudden the engine cuts out and you've got no steering whatsoever. So make sure you check that. How do you check it? Pretty sure it's in my crane pre-start video for the Franna. So you can always go and have a look at that. But essentially what you do is you turn your ignition on. So your ignition has to be on. Take your park brake off. And then it should allow you to steer it. You can actually hear the electrics working as you're steering it as well. But that must be working before you try and drive it on the road. Then you've got your other obvious checks. Check your fluid levels, check your tyre pressures, all of that kind of stuff as well. They're the main things you need to consider when you're driving a Franna or any vehicle on the road pretty much. Now don't forget the main things in the Franna, if you are used to operating a heavy vehicle, with the Franna, drive with one hand, and if you do start fishtailing, don't start accelerating out because you're going to worsen the problem. So make sure you wash that speed off nice and easy. Okay, now they're just the basics to driving the Franna on the road. Now look, there's quite possibly things that I have not mentioned, and that could be because a lot of it just comes as second nature. I don't even think about what I do, you just do it out of habit. So if you're out there and you can think, oh, he hasn't mentioned this or he hasn't mentioned that, chuck it in the comments below and we can have a chat about it later. All right, so I'm not going to be able to think of everything on the spot here. If there is something that I have forgotten about driving these heavy vehicles, leave it in the comments. All right, I will say one thing though, don't just jump in it by yourself. Make sure that you're trained in it as well, all right, because they are different. Make sure you do get that bit of seat time with someone who's experienced so that they can help guide you along the way as well. All right, so as I said, if I have forgotten anything, just leave it in the comment section and I will try and get back to it, or I'll have a look at it. If there's something different, we'll look at talking about that too. All right, so don't forget, if you want to keep updated as well, you can hit the like and subscribe button, and that way anytime I put out a new video, you can keep updated as well. All right, so I hope that helps you, and if you do want to see anything else, let us know. All right, thanks for your time and have a good evening.